which is a great event. I highly recommend it to everyone. At this time, every Sunday, Father Chris goes over and explains the upcoming sermon and the gospel reading usually. So that's a wonderful event. But thank you for letting me be here today and next week. This is really exciting for me because I love the evidence for the Christian faith. I mean, I'm not a Christian because it's a feel-good religion. I'm a Christian because that's the truth.
Amen.
Okay? You know, and I used to be an atheist, and I'm not going to go through that story here again today, but there's overwhelming evidence, and a lot of it relates to Christmas, and people don't know about it. So I've been reading about it, and I asked Father Chris if I could talk about it. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it, because then I'd have to learn it real good. And I learned a lot of things just in the last couple of weeks that have just blown me away. So let's try to go through with it. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So what I want to talk about today, if we can get through it, is the Star of Bethlehem and the dating of the birth of Jesus. Okay, so we've got a lot of facts, but I'm going to give you a theory. I'm not going to prove the exact date that Jesus was born, but I'm going to give you a theory that fits a lot of evidence, and hopefully I'll give you something to really think about in the next, today, maybe the next weeks, and maybe the rest of your life. And the astronomy in what I'm going to suggest has been checked by the top scientists at NASA, and it all holds together. So it's pretty powerful stuff, I think. But I'm going to warn you, after listening to me talk here, you may never think about some of those Christmas hymns quite the same way again.
Good.
Okay. So what was the Star of Bethlehem? I mean, you know, is it a myth? You know, people think, it amazes me how people think the Bible is mythology. I mean, we live in such a foolish culture. There's never been an archaeological find that has disproved anything in the Bible. Quite to the contrary. I mean, the cities named in the Bible have been found one after the other. So much is true. So what was the star, if there was a star? You know, and we're going to look at possible explanations. Was it a comet? Some people say it was a meteor, supernova, you know, an exploding star. What could it have been? You know, in those days there were two kinds of stars. There were the fixed stars and the moving stars, what we call planets. So we're going to look at what was happening in the ancient sky. And we're going to look at this. And this is a great mystery for 2,000 years. What was the Star of Bethlehem? Okay. And so what do we have new today? Well, what we have new today is we have computers. And today's computers can reproduce what the skies look like at any point in history and any place on Earth. It's actually rather simple. I mean, inexpensive software you can install on your own computer and do this. And we also found recently that, this is a key fact I'll get into, that King Herod died in 1 BC. If you look it up, you'll say, on the internet, you'll say most people think he died in 4 BC, but that actually was a copying error in some manuscripts. All the ancient manuscripts before 1544 would show that Herod died in 1 BC. Okay, next one, please. All right, so we're going to talk about astronomy, not astrology. Astrology is the idea that the stars control fate. Belief in astrology, I believe, was punishable by death at one point in Jewish law. But you're allowed to look to the stars for signs. I mean, here's a psalm that you probably are all familiar with. The heavens declare the glory of God. Skies proclaim the work of his hand. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. Now let's go to something written by St. Paul. Faith comes from hearing the message, and the message is heard through the word of Christ. But I asked, did they not hear? St. Paul was asking, did the Jews not know that Christ was coming? And he says, of course they did. Then he quotes the Psalms about the stars.
Yeah.
Their voice has gone out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world. In other words, I think St. Paul was telling us that the Jews saw the coming of Christ in the stars. Okay, so I want to next slide, please. What I want to do now is review the characters in the story of the Star of Bethlehem, go through the key players, if you will, and then I'm going to we're going to read through Matthew's story, 12 verses in the book of Matthew, pretty easy, and then we're going to look at the ancient skies and put it all together. And I'm going to give you a suggestion of how it all fits together, okay? So it's sort of like a three-part sermon, okay? We got the characters, we got the biblical text, and I'm going to put it together.
I like it so far, Mr.
So one of the characters behind the whole story is God. And we live, again, in an age of tremendous foolishness. People think, the nonsense about God. I mean, to me, this is my other lecture, God is a scientific fact, okay? From why does anything exist, to the absolute astonishingly fine-tuning of all the constants of physics, to the origin of life, there's no atheist explanation. If you think life could have formed by chance, then you really need to look at how complex life is.
Right.
And every species on Earth, and this is what I'm going to try to write my new book about, if I can, with pictures and simply, is built by code, a much more complex code than the code of computers. And every species on Earth has new sections of code, paragraphs and chapters, not related to any other code. And the odds against, it's impossible that came about through any Darwinian evolution process. So to me, God is a scientific fact. Let's go to Jesus. Next slide, please.
Good.
Jesus is a historical fact that he lived. All right, there's no doubt about that. Tacitus, I'm not good at pronouncing names, forgive me. He's the greatest historian of ancient Rome. He wrote 30 volumes on the history of Rome. And he talks about Jesus. Suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pilate. And I like this. And a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome. I mean, to me it's clear. He's talking about the resurrection. Okay? Now keep in mind that to even say that you thought the resurrection might be true risked the most impossible, torturous death in those days. I mean, they would strip you naked and nail you to a cross for saying you believe that Jesus rose. Yet, people came forth and did. And that, to me, that's pretty close to proof of the resurrection. We have Josephus, who's a Jewish court historian for a later emperor. He mentions James as the brother of Jesus. Jesus was known to be wise and virtuous. It was Pilate who condemned Jesus, and Jesus' disciples reported that he rose from the dead. Okay, so we got Jesus is a real person. Okay, what about the Magi? Translated wise men in the Bible. So, the Jedi Knights, that's who they were. Okay, I was trying to figure out, I mean, they were like, they didn't have lightsabers or fight battles, but they were the smartest people of their age. They're court astronomers, likely a hereditary priesthood. Daniel was appointed their chief by Nebuchadnezzar. You can read that in the book of Daniel. And when Nebuchadnezzar died, his jealous cohorts tried to get him killed, which ended up being thrown into the lion's den. I heard about that story, but anyhow, it's a real priesthood. And here's something from a Roman historian who, writing from Alexandria, Egypt, who lived at the time of Jesus, said, among the Persians there is a body of the Magi who, and basically investigating the works of nature for the purpose of being acquainted with the truth. Sort of like today's scientists, right? That's what scientists do at their leisure, become initiated themselves, and initiate others in the divine virtues by very clear explanations. These are very smart people. Now, I've read like a dozen summaries or theories about the birth of Jesus and all this, and a lot of them say, well, we don't know really who these Magi were. Maybe they came from Babylon. Well, Babylon was destroyed hundreds of years before Jesus was born. Or then you read, well, it could have been 1,000 Magi. The Bible doesn't say how many. And then, just 2 weeks ago, I came across this, I found this next slide. There's a quote from a man by the name of Marco Polo. In Persia is the city of Saba, from which the 3 Magi set out. And in this city they are buried in 3 very large and beautiful monuments, side by side. Above them is a square building, beautifully kept. The bodies are still entire, with hair and beard remains. It's 1,300 years later. I mean, I just was blown away when I read that. Marco Polo there were other Europeans who traveled to Asia back in those days, but he was considered the most trustworthy authoritarian. I mean, look at the details in that. I mean, that's not made up. If you're going to make up something, you don't put those kind of details in. And there are 3 of them, and they obviously knew something pretty good about embalming. So they set out, and Saba is the name of the town. It's about 60 miles southwest of Tehran. It's a real city, real city. Okay, then we got Herod. Thank you. He's appointed king of the Jews by the Roman Senate in 40 B.C. Heard that term before. We'll come back to that story. And he was a piece of work. Cruel and paranoid. He killed 2 of his sons because he thought they might take him out and kill his wife. He was a master builder. And one story I came across about Herod is he was afraid people weren't going to grieve when he died. So on his deathbed, he summoned distinguished people from all over the country and gave orders that they should all be killed when he died, so that people would grieve. That's the kind of man Herod was. Personally, they can do that, but I want you to keep in mind the temperament of Herod as we now go through the story of Matthew. Okay, so we're going to read now Matthew, the first 12 verses in chapter 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, now note the word after, alert, forget about all those nativity scenes. The wise men were not there. Okay, there's actually 3 clues that they weren't there when Jesus was born in these 12 verses. This is the first one. Pretty clear, after. In the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men, that's how it's translated, from the east came to Jerusalem, that's our Magi, said, where is he who has been born king of the Jews? Now try to picture this statement. Okay, they came from at that time was the Parthian Empire, which was from a few hundred years before Jesus' birth to a few hundred years after. They came from the enemy country. They had, obviously, a famous reputation as being the Jedi Knights. They show up unannounced and say, where's the real king? You can't make this up, okay? When anybody's court to show up and say, where's the real king? I mean, Herod probably, if it was an ordinary person, would kill him on the spot, obviously, but he doesn't want to start another war. The Roman Empire is at peace at this particular moment in history, and these people have a reputation. And Herod figures out, not being a dumb guy, I can use these guys, okay? I can use them. And then they say this, for we saw his star as it rose and have come to worship him. Again, as it rose. I'll give you some astronomy on that, but remember those words. When Herod heard this, he was troubled. I mean, he's having a fit, okay? The smartest people in the world come and tell him there's a new king. And he assembles everybody and says, what's going on? Herod doesn't have a clue about the star. That proves it wasn't some comet or supernova, or some obvious sign in the sky. By the way, comets were omens of doom. So there's something going on where you have to have a little bit of sophistication to recognize the signs here. Okay? Herod doesn't have a clue. But he asks, what's going on? And then we have Chris. And then they quote Micah. In Bethlehem of Judea, so it is written by the prophet. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least, but from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people. And then Herod says, okay, so Herod's paranoid. Says, okay, what time? Tell me again when you saw the star. And please go find him and tell me so I can come worship him. Because he figures, okay, he sends his soldiers out. I mean, he's already got these wise men. They can do anything. I'm going to send them out, and I'm just right behind him doing my cleanup operation. Not a big deal. Okay. That's the next slide. And so they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Okay, and when they saw the star, rejoiced. Going into the house, they're not in a manger anymore. Okay, going into the house, they saw the child. The Greek word here for child indicates a toddler, not a newborn. With his mother. They fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasure, they offered him gifts. And God says, don't go back to Herod. So they go back to what's now Iran, a different way. Okay? That's the verses. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the astronomy. Jupiter was known to the ancients as the king planet, 300 times more massive than the Earth. About every 12 years it orbits the sun, 11.8 years. It's the fourth brightest object in the sky after the sun, the moon, Venus, and sun, moon, and Venus. Regulus is called the king's star by both the Babylonians and the Romans. It's the brightest star in the constellation of Leo the Lion. Regulus and Leo the Lion were associated in those days with Judah. There's a quote I wrote down somewhere here from Genesis. Genesis chapter 49, verse 9, you are a lion's cub of Judah. There's no references in the Bible. Okay, so let's put it together now. All right, so here's the theory of, and there's a video called The Star, put out in 2007, you might want to get it. So in those days, by the way, you didn't have light pollution. You didn't have air pollution. In the summers, you'd sleep out on the roof in the Middle East. And, I mean, I don't know if everybody here has seen the Milky Way, but it's spectacular on a beautiful night. I mean, it is awe-inspiring. Years ago, I was sailing in Canada in the middle of a clear, moonless night, like 30 miles from land. And the Milky Way, I steered towards one edge of the Milky Way. I mean, it split the heavens. It is fantastic. These people in those days, they weren't dumb, that's for sure. I think they were smarter than we are. They paid attention to the heavens. So what you have here is, here's the star Regulus. And Jupiter comes down in September of 3 BC. That's the king star. The king planet comes down, makes a halo over Regulus and keeps going.
Is that documented somewhere?
Yes, you can see it on your computer software. Or you can watch this movie, The Star. This is mid-September, 3 BC. Looks like something kingly's going on. Okay, they would have never seen this before. And probably could happen again, but not for, this is called retrograde motion. When in our orbit, we're like cars going around the sun, and we're going faster because we're closer in. So when we pass Jupiter, it looks like it's going backwards a little bit. Okay? But for it to align this beautifully with the star Regulus was a very rare event. I mean, Regulus is in the plane of the zodiac, so the planets go by it. But again, for this kingly coronation, pretty special. But I'm just giving you some theories. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of omens beyond what I can describe here, but I think these are interesting now. So something kingly going down in Judah. Okay, September. And I'm going to suggest that this is the date of Christ's conception. Okay, next slide. Okay, now it's February, and the Roman Senate says, everybody, go back to where you came from. We're going to count. We're going to do an empire-wide census. So Joseph and Mary go to Bethlehem to be counted. Okay, now, June 17, 2 BC. 9 months after the conjunction of Regulus and Jupiter, the king planet Jupiter joins Venus, the planet Venus, and the brightest object in the sky other than the moon and the sun. Venus is always associated with femininity in just about all cultures. And in a spectacular conjunction. Conjunction typically played, you can see it in a number of planetariums around the world. They'll put on a show showing you what this event looked like. I think when the Magi told Herod, we saw his star as it rose, I think they're bragging. You can see Venus in the daytime. You have to know exactly where to look. I think the Magi saw that, and they saw Jupiter coming up next to it. Close. And then as the day went on, they got closer and closer together until at sunset, they merged into one entity, directly pointing west. Oh, yes?
Would Jupiter have been behind Venus in the light from both of them?
No. They didn't actually overlap. But the distance between them, the angular separation, was less than the width of a pin at 10 feet. So beyond the ability of almost all people to make out. So they didn't block each other's light. They amplified each other's light. So this is the brightest star anyone had ever seen. Okay? The two brightest planets coming together so that you cannot tell them apart. And as the sun sets, Jupiter and Venus, they merge into one. And in the direction of Jerusalem, and a full moon rises. Full moons were associated with the ancients with very special events. There were probably other things, and if you watch that video, The Star, it talks about interpretations from the book of Revelation, Virgin, clothed in the sun. I think when it rose, it was in the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin. Okay, so we got something going on here. I think this is the date of Jesus' birth. That's the theory I'll put forward to you. Let's note a few things here. Jesus was born in Bethlehem. We can all agree on that. That's where the sacrificial lambs up for the temple in Jerusalem were born, were bred. Jesus, I think, was born in spring, this suggests. Spring is when it was birthing season for the lambs. So I suggest the reason shepherds were out in their fields was because the sheep were giving birth. Okay, now other people say, well, it was December because that's what everybody knows, quote, but it would have been, it's normally cold in December. You're not sleeping out in the fields in December. So I wonder about, I think this fits up with a lot of things pretty well. Let's go on with the story. So now we're playing out And, okay, so I looked up this morning on Google Maps, Sabah, now Iran, to Jerusalem, 1,800 miles. Said I could get there in 22 hours if I drove fast. But they didn't have cars, they couldn't get on a plane. So camels go about 16 miles a day. You need time to prepare, maybe you need to make some stops. We're talking probably a 3-month journey, maybe more. And not an easy journey. A heck of a journey, frankly. And obviously there were 3 wise men, but they had an entourage. So, and they need time to prepare. Maybe they had to get permission. So I think them showing up in December of 2 BC, it's reasonable. It kind of fits the facts. Now, so they get to Jerusalem and they have this, they ask Herod, you know, where's the real king? Herod loves that. And Herod, as we saw, tells him to go to Bethlehem. Well, it's not hard, but I want to make one point about it. Everybody thinks that the Magi, and they're not kings, forget we 3 kings of Orient are, that they followed the star to Jerusalem. The Bible actually didn't say that. There was nothing in there that said they followed the star from Iran to Jerusalem. What you see about following the star is this point, after they were in Jerusalem. But you don't really need a star to get to Bethlehem from Jerusalem. It's 5 miles south on the main road. To get to Bethlehem from Jerusalem, 5 miles south on the main road. But in December of 2 BC, if they walked out in the dusk, maybe they wanted to go secretly. Jupiter is south to see the star. And then you get into this, the star stopped over the place where the child lay. So let's talk about that. That's kind of a hard point to fit, but I think there's a couple of explanations. One is that on the 25th of December, Jupiter stops its wandering in the skies. It hits one of these points, okay? It stops. And these were pretty savvy guys. They wouldn't notice that. Maybe they noticed they're following the star and somebody says, hey, it stopped. Or maybe they just, they're wandering around and finally going down the road, and at some point they see a house that's directly under Jupiter. It's another explanation. But they bring gifts. And whatever date it was, it's the first gifts given for Jesus' birth, the first Christmas, you could argue. There's a lot of people think that Christmas was set for December 25th to sort of usurp a pagan holiday at that time, which is false. It's actually the other way around. In 279 AD, the Romans decided to create their own holiday because Christmas was getting too popular. You can look that up. Nobody knows exactly how they came up with this date. Maybe it is related to the winter solstice. It's the beginning of the sun the day starting to lengthen. But it's quite possible also that the Magi arrived in front of Jesus December 25th, 2 BC. Jesus is no longer a newborn infant, and he's in a house, not a manger. Okay. So what's happening in 2 BC? Father Chris, we've had this, why did Jesus come when he came? I don't know. But 2 BC was not an ordinary year. 2 BC is arguably the high point of the Roman Empire. It's the 750th anniversary of the birth of Rome. It's the 25th Jubilee year of Augustus as emperor. And Augustus is given distinguished honors by the Roman Senate, and peace is breaking out all over. They're laying off legionnaires, okay? They're reducing the military. They're basically beating everybody they want to beat. The Parthian Empire, which had just decades earlier, actually occupied Israel, has been pushed back and begged for peace. 2 BC is a pretty good year in Roman history. Let's, well, we'll get into the dates of the crucifixion next week, but keep this in mind, please. Okay, now I'm going to want to return to, I skipped over a few verses in Matthew. So here's Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, remember the wise men, they head off, they go back to Jerusalem, but became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Well, this fits the story too, okay? Children weren't considered, almost considered sort of non-human in ancient societies. I mean, you know, until you were an adult. There was a rumor that I think in 63 BC that he was going to be born, and so the Romans slaughtered all these children. This sort of thing happened in those days, which also happened to be the year that the man who became Augustus Caesar was born and was reigning in 2 BC. They put a lot of stock in prophecies in Egypt. So Herod, I mean, he could have killed more children. He figured, okay, Jesus is born in June, it's December, you know, 6 months. I'll get everybody 2 years and under in the whole region. That'll handle it. Okay. Next slide. So, here's a thought. And we're going to get into more on the crucifixion, but the heavens are like a great clock. You know, at the small level, there's the quantum level, there's some unpredictability, but at the cosmic level, you can predict, again, using modern computers, what the skies look like. If these events mark Jesus' birth, then God knew the exact date when he flung the universe into creation. You know, I mean, I think it's humbling. So, no Three Kings of Orient are, maybe no nativity scenes with the wise men creeping up in the back, not good. But I think it, as you would say, Father Chris, it all fits together.
It does indeed.
It just all fits together, and I thought you might find it interesting on this Christmas season. How about a little time? We've got a few more minutes here, 10 minutes or so for questions, comments.
How was he not killed? All the children he was under the choice.
Because there's another, the angel came to Joseph and said, get the heck out. It's in the Bible. And he goes to Egypt. When I visited Cairo about 20 years ago, and there's a place where they'll tell you where the Holy Family stayed. Yeah, God was looking out for him. He told the wise men to head the other way, and he told Joseph to get the family out of town. And you know, and maybe I would suggest Joseph used the gold, frankincense, and myrrh to pay for the trip. That's right. Yes.
With the software being able to look back and see how the skies were, has there been any research or study done on forecasting the future of how the stars will align and if there's any kind of big event in upcoming years and can software do that?
The software can do that. There's someone who's written a book about a series of blood moons, for example. Blood moons are lunar eclipses. There's a book out of a series of 4 blood moons that I think either we're in the middle of or it's coming up. That we're going to see a blood moon at the crucifixion, so remember that term. But there's nobody's making any confident predictions on it, you know. I think Jesus says only the Father knows the time. That's right. So you can see it's pretty amazing. Yes.
Would you tell us more about the retrograde? In other words, Jupiter stopped, but did it whip around like that?
Well, yeah, the planets, the outer planets make loops in the sky, and this is actually a very thinner loop that I've drawn here. Because again, as we pass them, so we're all going in the same direction around the sun, okay? But we got the inside track compared to Jupiter. We're going faster. So when you compare to a very distant star, as we go faster, Jupiter moves backwards. Okay, from our spec here on Earth, it doesn't really go backwards, but it looks like it's going backwards. And there's a moment when we do that where Jupiter appears to stop forward. It's going forward, then it stops, and then it goes backwards. Okay, so it's not, again, it's not really going backwards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Doug, how long would the stop be? Herod, perspectively.
Good question. And I'm not really sure that, how long this, I think this may have been a 2-week event. I'm not sure right now. Jupiter's a lot further out than we are, so probably fairly quick. And you have to really be noticing what's going on to do this. But I mean, the evidence of ancient astronomy is everywhere. I mean, if you really read about those pyramids and how they were built and constructed, you know, they weren't tombs to the pharaohs. They were pointed. There's a chamber in the pyramids that goes through 17 layers of solid rock from the center of the pyramid directly to the belt in Orion, because they thought that when a pharaoh died, he became a star in Orion. You know, and or even, you know, Stonehenge, the Incas. They knew about astronomy. They watched the skies in those days. Yes.
Is the conjunction when you talked about Venus and Jupiter just an interesting fact, or do you believe that a Roman fertility god and king planet or something that was thought about?
Well, it is a fact that they can get
But I mean, their name.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
The naming, that it was important that Venus was a fertility god. When you talked about the conception happening at that point in time.
Yeah, I don't think that was the conception. I think that was the birth of Jesus, is what I'm saying. Okay? But you can interpret these signs in other ways. But I think what I gave you, you know, the chronology here of the Roman census, and I think it fits pretty good and matches Jesus being born at the time when the sacrificial lambs of God are born for the temple in Jerusalem. We're going to see next week that he dies at 3 p.m., which is when they slaughtered the lambs for the temple. And some other facts. So I think when the conjunction occurred, which, you know, I tried to find out if this is the most spectacular conjunction in history, and I was unable to do it. I'm not that good on the software and everything. I mean, but they definitely did get so close that you could not tell them apart, but they were not overlapping. And I mean, one side said, well, they were closer in 1200 AD, but at that time they were right next to the sun. Nobody would have seen them then. Yeah, it was a pretty spectacular event. I think of that we can be sure. Can I say it'll never be repeated?
Should we move the calendar up 2 years?
Well, there's no year zero, which is a fact that I learned. There's no year zero. So with Jesus being born, if this is correct, he's born a year and a half earlier, and which fits in with the date of the crucifixion. I'm going to suggest next week. You know, he's waited until 30 when he starts ministry, and then 3+ year ministry. It all fits together. But yeah, well, I mean, they didn't really know in the early church exactly when Jesus was born. But you wonder, this story from Matthew, I mean, people think that you can dismiss the whole Bible as nonsense, and in our crazy culture people do, but Matthew must have had hundreds of stories of Jesus pulled together, you know, and he thought this one was important. And if it really played out the way I've suggested, then it was an incredible thing from, you know, the most learned people of the age to travel over 1,000 miles into enemy country and ask Herod where the real king was. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, what prompted them to do so? I mean, what really started them on the journey?
Well, they knew of the Jewish prophecies. I mean, whether they were Jewish or not, and then probably they weren't, but, you know, I mean, Daniel was their chief at one point. They knew, and the Jews had been captive in Babylon, as we all know. So they knew of the Jewish prophecies. Prophecies were a big thing back then. And I think they saw these two events, and possibly some other, maybe the moon coming up on the other side. I mean, I can't tell you exactly what was important to them, but from what is recorded, my guess is they probably had half a dozen, perhaps, or other signs that were all pointing to this being a fantastically important date in history. So important that they would travel 1,000 miles. And you can dismiss it all as fantasy, but then, you know, why is Marco Polo telling us he saw the Jews? I mean, there must have been some people.
When did the Gregorian calendar start?
Oh, good. I don't know. I'm using the modern calendar dates. This calendar did not exist back at this time, okay? But I've got to put it all in our calendar for us. But that's a great question. Many years later is all I know. Yes.
There's a book called The Fourth Wise Man. I don't know if anybody's read it. And it's a legend, but it's a beautiful Christmas story. And it begins with exactly what you're talking about, that these Magi were into the Zoroaster faith, Parthenia, they described the whole thing and how they decided to follow it. And the fourth Magi obviously didn't meet up with the other three, and they left without him. But the beauty of the story is how the fourth Magi lived out his life in search of Christ. It's a very short book, but it goes right in line with what you're talking about. It's really just an interesting story.
There's other Iranian books and legends that suggest that Sabé was where the wise men set out from. So it's not just Marco Polo's writings. Although, again, I was just astonished to come across that, because most people go just say, oh, we don't really know about the wise men. So, anything else? Okay, thanks. Come.